So, hi Nadim. We're in wonderful Mayfair this morning again, and I got to thinking this morning about how did we get here and what brought us here.
Well, that's a good question. Good morning, Michael. How are you today?
Fantastic.
Excellent. Well, yes, we're here in Mayfair. If you recall, some years ago, we sat in our office up north and we started to draw a dream board. We still have that dream board today, and one of the dreams that we put on that board was to have a presence in London, because that's very important, and how we're seen as an organisation to support business across the UK and globally. London is seen as the place to be. I don't know whether you remember, Michael, but there were other things on that dream board that were important to us. Can you remember a few of them?
Yeah. Trust, fun, travel. Yeah, loads.
So building trust, massively important to us, and the journey that we take ourselves on, and our clients, and equally as important, the team that work with us.
Yeah.
Do you remember that we always said that we should have fun?
Yeah, definitely.
And wow, it's been fun, and it still is fun. And today, for us, is really exciting to be filmed and to be talking about what we do and why we do it is massively important. You asked the question, why do we do what we do? Well, everybody has their own reasons why in life. So if you ask me that question personally, I'd answer it in a different way to why do we do that for our clients. So personally, my reason why is to look after my wife and my two kids, 2 boys, and they're massively important from a point of view of providing them education and knowledge to allow them to move forward and provide something useful to society. If you ask me about business, the cornerstone of business are the people that work within that business, and whether you call them employees, partners, shareholders, directors, they all have an important part to play. And that important part for us is recognising what their reason whys are. And if you can recall, and I laugh about this when we see clients, because we're not here to sell anything to clients. We're here to listen and understand. And one of the questions that I ask, and we'll see if you can remember the question you ask, it's a bit of a test for you, is what's the end game look like? Because we're always looking to provide a solution that works backwards from that. You have a different phrase, which slightly...
Plan for the divorce.
Yeah, plan for the divorce. They both mean the same thing,
Sure.
But it allows us to build trust, and it allows us to listen to what clients want and need, because that's massively important. There's too many organisations that want to go in and present what they do and not listen, and then the doors are closed on them. I'm quite proud of what we've achieved so far and how we've achieved what we've done. Exciting times ahead for 2022.
Fantastic.
What do you think the order of the day is for 2022?
Certainly look into staff retention service. I think it's massively important, not only for businesses out there, but for individual employees. I think a lot of people that are working for companies today are very worried about the environment and about their business that they work for. So I think that lots of employees out there, we could help businesses to keep and retain those staff by some of the strategies that we've got. And I think that it's a win-win situation. The business wins and the staff win. And from the conversations we've been having recently, it certainly feels like this is an area that is a focus for most businesses right now.
I totally agree. And like organisations that are forward-thinking, they survey their employees. They want to understand what their employees do. And to that end, something that is important to us, I note that we have some esteemed guests that have been invited in today, and really it's about understanding what's important to them today. For us, surveying clients, surveying business leaders, inspirational individuals is key to us providing the right service and to actually deliver some outcomes for potential clients and our existing clients.
I think that one of the things that we've always wanted to impress on anybody that we speak to is, how do we add value? That's always been my biggest thing in business all my life. How can I add value to the organisation and to the clients that I've helped along the way? And if I can add value, then I'll get paid for that. Money's not the driving force for me. It's always been about being able to help and add value. And if I can continue to do that, I know that you add value in everything that you do with our clients, and long may that continue. We'll know, because if we don't, clients will say no. And
every organisation has some intellectual property. Every organisation has special ways of working. But if you had to pinpoint one thing that's our magic recipe, what is that?
The ability to be creative in the delivery of solutions for the client which they haven't thought about themselves or anybody else presented.
And think about that in the way of adding value.
So we add value because we're an organisation that will always want to have skin in the game. So we will say, look, we can take a commercial view on something that we can deliver, knowing that you're just not going to throw money at something. We are taking a commercial view, and we will be in this with you.
Okay, I agree. Other things that I can think about as well when we've talked about what it is we do. One massive thing that's really important that lots of people don't do is ask the right question. So asking the right question is fundamental to what we do.
It is.
Really important, because if we don't understand what the client wants, we will get nowhere. Sure. So that's massively important. And if you said to me, what does our organisation do? We teach financial education, but we do it in a different way, because the other magic recipe for other than asking the right question is to teach people how to think. And that's not in an arrogant way, it's in a challenging way, to be thought-provoking. So we say, if you think the opposite. We want to challenge our clients' beliefs. We want to challenge those limiting beliefs that have stopped them moving forward and creating the right structure. And that's really important, and that is a process that takes time. So you don't just accept that what somebody says that you meet in a nice office in Mayfair. You have to really get to know those people, and our job is to get to know the clients, is to understand their requirements, what their reason whys are, understand the end game for them, and then work backwards from that to deliver something that I think augments shareholder value. It converts their corporate wealth into personal wealth that then helps families. It helps their families to grow and be educated. And something really key in the theme about what we're talking about today is that if you said to me, why are employees important to a business? Well, they're a really important asset to a business, and it's important that businesses look after those assets, because most people's reasons why are their family. So if you can provide solutions that benefit families, that automatically translates into providing stronger and more vibrant communities. And families are the cornerstone of communities. So as an organisation, it's important that your staff, your employees become part of the wider family of the organisation. And so that organisation then is as important to the employees as anything else. You then get loyalty, you then have engagement, you then have increased productivity, but more importantly, you're showing your employees that you care about them and that you're there for their well-being. And families are the cornerstone and foundation of communities, as I've already said, and that is one of the single goals to how we can help organisations to have happier workforce that are well supported.
Clearly, one of the things that we also do and we strive for almost daily, today is a classic example of this, is being outside our comfort zones. And it's amazing actually how much you grow by being outside of your comfort zones. And I know that you've challenged me on many, many times to be outside of my comfort zone. You never take the answers that I give lightly. You always challenge and test and question. And that's very healthy, I think, in a relationship in business. But I hope that passes on to the clients, where we're saying to them, look, what we're talking about with what it is that we can do is something that you've probably never spoken about before or thought about. So getting the client to think about being outside their comfort zone is something that I think is a skill that we both have in helping and supporting those clients in that area.
I think that's massively important, and to add to that, I think the voracious appetite we have for personal development, but not only in our own lives and personal lives, but in the lives of the people that we meet and touch, is massively important. So working outside your comfort zone, I explain that to my children of, you can, when you learnt to swim, you were in a rubber ring and you were inside that rubber ring. Yeah. And if you never left that rubber ring, you'd have never then got to do a strong front crawl or a back crawl or a butterfly. And so we want to take risks. We want our staff to take risks. They may make mistakes, but we have to support them and not criticise them. Sure. And it's really important that they always work out their comfort zone. If you remember, I can remember a team meeting that we had, and one of the actions from that team meeting was that we said to each member of the team, at least once a week, we want you to run towards a problem and we want you to solve that problem. You may feel really uncomfortable about it and you may not want to do it, and it may be the thing that's in the pit of your stomach that's causing you issues and hassle each day, but by God, you'll feel amazing once you've dealt with it. We believe in strong communication, so one of the things that we certainly say to our team is pick the telephone up. Don't hide behind emails. Don't hide behind letters. Don't leave voicemails. Be honest, transparent, and tell it as it is, because people respect us. I remember talking last night, and we had an amazing dinner last night with a new team that we're working with, and I can remember while walking to the restaurant saying, we're the people that are totally honest with clients. We're not the yes people. Yeah. So if you're a client and you want us to help you and you ask us a question, we're not going to give you the answer that you want to hear. We're going to give you the truth. And you'd much more value that in an individual and an organisation than somebody giving you lip service that doesn't allow you to achieve your goals.
Just papers over the cracks. It puts a sticking plaster on sometimes, which is not what's needed for clients. They want to know the truth.
I think the order of the day and some of the things that we're talking about today also is the cost of poor retention in a business, and that's massively significant, especially now. What do you think the pandemic has done to that for UK businesses and businesses around the world?
I think we were talking yesterday, and I think it was a pre-pandemic, it was 2.5 days lost in lost sick days, and you told me that last year it was something like 4.1 lost sick days. I think we both said last night when we were talking that that could be estimated. It could well go into double figures. It could well be up at 12, 13, 14 sick days. That's going to have a huge impact, not only financially, but on a lot of businesses. They're not going to be able to sustain that level of sickness in their business. So companies have to do something about that. And I think that we're well placed with what we've got to be able to help companies because sickness obviously comes from lots of different areas. Wellness and mental health, all of these things now are coming to the fore, and people are starting to want to talk about these things, rightly so, and we should welcome that. And I think that by putting these strategies in place that we have, employee benefits, loyalty tools, reward mechanisms, those types of things will hopefully start to help companies to drive those sickness days down, but also the cost of retention, the cost of employing staff.
Do you know what I was surprised about? And we looked at some surveys done by Oxford University, and out of employees that were surveyed, 15% of employees considered themselves highly motivated. Wow. That's a very, very low number. Yes, retention certainly is the order of the day, because good, talented staff are not available in plentiful supply. I think that's partly due to Brexit. I think it's partly due to the pandemic, and I know from the people that I speak to that everybody's considering new work-life balances. They've enjoyed working at home. They've enjoyed taking the children to school. They've enjoyed picking the children up. They've enjoyed making a cup of coffee and just having 20 minutes downtime and working at home. But and a flexible employer in the past would be somebody that allowed flexi time. Oh, you can work at home. You can have some technology that allows you to do that work elsewhere. That's the new norm now. So employers are having to work so much harder than they've ever worked before. And the reason why employers have had to do that isn't just because they can't recruit, but it's so many other factors. You've mentioned very rightly the sickness element, which is massive, and this isolations and what's gone on in the last 18 months is unprecedented. And fortunately, businesses have had support, but that support now is finishing. And so we have to innovate. Yes. We have to inspire our team, and we have to consider what losing an individual in your organisation looks like to the organisation. So let me give you an example. Just imagine that you have 500 staff that work for you, and your retention rate is 70%. And some industries it's 5, 10, some it's 50, 60%. Yes. So, but imagine it was 70%. What that means to that business is that they have to find 150 new people a year to do the jobs that they're already doing. Now, it's very, very difficult to recruit, and it's costly. So let's assume that the cost of recruiting is about £7,000 a person, which includes induction time and the cost of an agency or a recruiter. You times that by 150 people, you're looking at 1.1 million of hard cost. Wow. Now, that's significant. Now, you may have strategies to recruit that cost you less money than that, but then let's think about the other items that are up for consideration. It takes 28 weeks for an individual to be upskilled and get to being used to the policies, processes, ways of working, customers and other members of the team to be productive. Yep. On average, when somebody leaves a business, the average loss of turnover is anything up to £30,000 per annum per individual. Well, potentially that could cause the business's turnover to halve within a year, and no business can sustain that.
No.
And equally as important, when somebody leaves, the loss of knowledge in that business to a competitor potentially
Yeah.
can be catastrophic. And that loss of knowledge, we all know businesses that have Bob in the technical department that knows how to sort that problem, and everybody, he's that go-to person. When Bob goes, what happens? Customers lose faith, trust in an organisation, and suddenly the turnover and their reputation goes down. So we know the challenges that businesses have, and these are the touch points from a cost perspective, and staff being engaged and being motivated is massively important, and well-being is very much the order of the day, and care. From a staff perspective, something that's been really, really interesting from the surveys that we've looked at, the majority of surveys rate care, appreciation, rewards, benefits, perks, all above pay rises when they're considering whether they stay at that employer of choice.
Above 80%, I think that number was. When we looked at that, we were really surprised, weren't we?
Fantastic, yes. 80% of staff that were surveyed said they'd rank all those other items above a pay rise. And they'd rank those items very, very highly if they were considering a new employer. So, massively important. And how we deliver that as an organisation, because it's quite key. It's very easy to put a reward system and advertise that in a job advert, but what's key is how it's communicated. Yep. We provide a technology solution to communicate that. That technology solution serves up the benefits. It allows employees to genuinely see those benefits, and they're not just benefits that are for them personally, they're benefits for their family, which ties in with the cornerstone of communities and families. And we're able to serve up a variety of different options depending on what that staff group want, and different industries require different things. So our piece of technology delivers a retention strategy that can save significant amounts of money. We believe that with a successful retention strategy, we can save anything from 1% to 4% of the gross payroll. Now, that's a real big statement to say, but it has to have the commitment of all of the senior leadership team of the organisation. Yes. But we're very, very strong in the belief, and we have solutions that certainly can guarantee 1%.
Yes.
So we can guarantee 1% saving of an organisation's gross payroll. That is massive and can be used to fund the retention programme. So, very important. Are you excited about today's interviews?
Very excited, a little bit nervous, a little bit of the butterflies in the tummy, because there are some great people coming today. And I always smile when I feel a little bit nervous, but really looking forward to today. You?
Yeah, can't wait. If you remember, Michael, in support of risk-taking, something that we said yesterday when we were saying it, doesn't matter whether you get it wrong. Doesn't matter. We're here today to learn about other people.
Yes.
And so it's not about us. I know this first little bit of segment was really for the listeners to understand more about you and I, more about our organisation. There's a piece that I certainly want you to talk about in a minute, and which is more about our office and the estate and this mural on the wall behind us. But yeah, it's about today. It's about asking the right questions.
Absolutely.
And you ask one question, and it's like water going down a river. And for somebody that's passionate and is interested in what they do and interested in how they drive their organisation forward, I think it'll be easy for you. You're a personable guy, and people like you, Michael, and don't worry about making mistakes.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about what's behind you then, because this is our boardroom. in Mayfair, in London, for Success CXP, and this room and building has history.
It does. And when we first came here, and we walked into this boardroom, the first thing that we did is what nearly every single person does when they see this fantastic 4 foot by 4 foot wonderful coat of arms. The Duke of Westminster's coat of arms is on our boardroom wall.
I see 1621.
Yeah, that's how long it's been around. It's been this boardroom here is part of the overall group of rooms and within the building that's been around, as you say, since 1621. And the Duke of Westminster, the first Duke of Westminster, Thomas Grosvenor, he met a little girl, and that little girl was called Mary Davis. Now,
isn't that our street address?
That's our street address, Davis Street.
Yeah.
Central London, just Bond Street tube stop. We walk up Davis Street for about 20, 30 seconds.
Claridge is across the road.
Claridge is just on the corner. And we walk in here, and Davis Street was named after Mary Davis. Now, she was a 12-year-old girl when she first met Thomas Grosvenor, the first Duke of Westminster. And not long after that, they were married. Now, it wasn't Thomas who owned all of the wealth back then. He was obviously quite wealthy, but it was Mary Davis's family.
Right, most people would think a duke,
Yes.
would have the money.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that's interesting.
Yeah, it was Mary Davis's family who'd inherited Mayfair, Belgravia, Chelsea, Hyde Park, St James Park, Park Lane and Pimlico. They'd inherited all of that.
I heard that, and I've heard you telling this story before, and I've heard that they were useless pieces of land outside the city walls of London because the city walls of London was the financial hub.
Chelsea was actually called Chelsea Fields, and that's what it was, Chelsea Fields. And obviously today it's probably one of the most valuable pieces of land and real estate that you can get. And so what they did, and what the first Duke of Westminster did very cleverly with the lawyers around him, they decided that they would protect it. So they took a piece of paper, literally, and placed all of that wealth into the art collections, the land, the property. They put it into a piece of paper, and that was called a trust.
So how did they do that, though? How did he get that wealth then? Because it was her wealth and her family's wealth.
That's right. And so back then there was a word that was used widely called coverture. And coverture meant that when a man married a woman, everything that the woman owned was passed to the man 100%.
Wow, that's not really PC nowadays, is it?
Can you only imagine that today?
Wow, no, not at all.
No. And so that's what happened. And the very, very astute first Duke of Westminster, who his ancestors must love with a passion, because he was the person first in their family who was the person that protected pretty much everything they still have today. So they've passed down that wealth through generations without pretty much any of it being lost in things like inheritance tax, reclaim from the government, and loss through the liabilities such as taxes.
I guess something that's really important there is to understand why that was done, because a lot of people might think it was to avoid tax, and I don't think that is the situation.
Not at all.
But there are many assets within that estate that we're aware of that, if weren't protected, could have been lost. And so the strategy of putting that into a trust for estate planning was massively important, because a story that links quite well in with that story is post First World War. A lot of the assets of families around the UK, when the First World War happened, the young men went to fight, didn't come back, and unfortunately death duties at that time, I think the number was 70%. And so families had to find 70% inheritance tax, or it was called death duties at the time.
That's right.
That wiped out estates. It wiped out treasures of this country and part of the history, because people couldn't afford to maintain them. Then, normally what happened. Normally we don't have wars that often, and families don't die, and generations are able to rebuild their wealth over a period of time. But what wasn't taken into consideration was that the Second World War came very, very shortly after the First, and did the same thing and wiped out another generation, which was devastating to the families. And equally devastating was that they had to find the death duties again. The families couldn't do it. No. And so the founder of a very, very, very clever and worthwhile organisation, which we value and have enjoyed on many occasions, Michael, the National Trust,
yes,
went to these families after the Second World War and said, I understand that you've got some big death duties to pay. How about we look after those assets and treasure them? We transfer them to the National Trust, and we will look after them and will allow you to live in the West Wing or part of the property and still be able to live where your family once lived. What a fantastic strategy. You know, some things are worth preserving, and history as we see it today, there's a lot of people that want to tear down history for good reason, so I'm not here to say that they're wrong, but you can't rewrite history.
No.
And history is there to teach us about the future and what's happened previously. Some things are good and some things are not so good. So fantastic to hear about the coat of arms. Could you tell me more about those coat of arms?
Yeah,
I see some writing. I'm not a learned colleague with Latin, but there is some writing on there.
Well, the middle part is the part which you'll see on the passports of the UK, and it says "Oni soi ki mali pence," and that means shame on them who think evil of it. It all came from King Edward III, and it was all about a party. One night they had a party, and I think it was one of his relatives who was dancing, and unfortunately, and this is where the Order of the Garter came from, her garter fell down and it stuck around the bottom of her ankle, and people were laughing, and King Edward went to his relative and took the garter and put it on his own leg, and then looked around to see whether those same people were laughing. Now, don't really know too much about the sort of dynamics and the reasons why he did that, but it's a fascinating thing, and to have that now on the middle of our passports is a unusual but interesting fact. And
so just remind me again then, so what does that mean?
Oni soi ki mali pence is Latin, and it means shame on them who think evil or ill of it.
Wow, so the king really wanted to defend the lady.
He did.
And came up with that. Interesting. Okay, and the writing at the bottom.
BT Pacifi, which is the Duke of Westminster's motto, which is "Blessed are the peacemakers," which is wonderful. And I've always loved that. And it's the first thing that my eyes were drawn to first, the two words at the bottom. I think it's an amazing thing, and I've always loved it. Every single time I come into this office, and we're here very regularly, certainly weekly, if not daily, and I look at it every time and I'm fascinated by it. But I'm fascinated even more so by the story and the history behind it. It's wonderful.
I think it's interesting, the protective nature, you know, and when we look back or we come back to employees, something that, and I remember us having a conversation the other day, Michael, we were talking about how employees are viewed. And, you know, I one of the great questions I think that's quite thought-provoking is an employee an asset or a liability? And I'm always interested in what people might say about that. What's your thought on that?
Well, I liked what you said when we were talking to the gentleman one day of his company, and you explained very well about the ability for a company to look at assets and treat them very carefully and kindly, like a pension fund, a property in a pension fund.
So would you say an employee is an asset or a liability?
I'd definitely say that they are an asset and needed to be treated like an asset, carefully, lovingly, for the long term, so that they can be judged in that way over a period of time. They're ultimately going to make the profit and the service for that company. But I think personally that most companies treat their employees like a liability.
We don't disagree much in life, but one thing I would say if I was asked that question, and so I agree with what you're saying, but I would say that they're both.
Okay.
I'd say they're an asset and a liability. And if you asked that question 20 years ago, most employers would say they're a liability.
Yes.
They're a cost to my business. If you ask that question today, I think a lot of employers and organisations would say they're an asset. They're important, they're my most important asset and treasured possession. But I'm saying they're both.
Yes.
One thing that's really interesting, and drilling down a little bit more on this particular topic, is how, given a choice and a question that we ask somebody, are they an asset or a liability? And people say they're an asset. But why do we then only treat the symptoms of poor relations of employees? Because if you have an employee that's unhappy or raises a grievance or is in a disciplinary, the organisation focuses really hard on that specific case. They don't look at the cause of why the employee might have been unhappy or raised that grievance. So if, for example, and I compare that an organisation might be selling widgets and the cost of raw materials has risen by 30% and the cost of transport's risen by 400%, people in the organisation from a strategic perspective would put all their energy and focus into solving that big problem, the cause, and to deal with it. But it's interesting that organisations focus on an individual rather than focusing on the cause and looking for strategies to help employees. And so I would put out there that it's important now for the modern organisation to put strategy in place that protect their employees just like they're protecting their stock, their pension,
yes,
their buildings. So you have a building in an organisation, how do you protect that? Well, you insure against it, you maintain that building, you make the upkeep and the presentation of that building as best as possible, and
yes,
you look after it and you make sure it's watertight. Why can't we do the same with employees? And so the savvy employer of 2022 has got to start looking at new ways to look after their staff, new ways to motivate the staff, new ways to engage their staff, new ways to reward them and provide benefits to their families, because then they're going to be the employer of choice, they're going to be the business that thrives, they're going to be the business that doesn't have a reduction in turnover and is seen as an amazing place to come and work. And
not just by the employee, but by the employee's family as well, because that wider conversation and wider thought process will come as a result of that caring employer.
And I think that any savvy employer organisation is certainly going to be looking at their corporate social responsibilities so much closer now, and looking at health and programmes to do with well-being and health and having support for mental health is very much at the fore now, because I think we all underestimate the effect of the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic, but the effects are long-reaching, and some individuals with long COVID that we really just don't understand. So we are going to have to focus on care and support for our staff groups and love them like any other asset, and deservedly so.